Hi guys, Freddy here, welcome back to a house rules video. Now over the past couple of videos, we've come up with the rule system I want to take forward into a game. Now while these videos will generally focus on that, I'm going to try and keep them as system agnostic as possible. So if you've decided that the rule system you want is adding bonuses from skills and attributes to a d20 roll and rolling a d20 against a target number, I'm going to try and keep these as supporting of that as possible. But the system that I've come up with, that I like the idea of, is that for your skills and attributes, you'll be rolling a certain amount of d6s. Now, successes will be counted as rolling a 5 or a 6, but a 6 counts as double. But counter to that, a 1 counts as a fail and takes away from your successes. And if you end up with a net number of fails, so more fails than you've got successes, then it's a critical fail and the games master can introduce something. So let's say you're picking a lock, then you set off an alarm system, or you break your tools. Something beyond just, I failed to pick the lock, I didn't get enough successes. So that is the system I'm going to work for. Some people have commented that they think it's a bit complex, where the dice is meaning different things. I'm not saying that I'm glued to this system. It, of course, needs testing. So we shall see as we go on through these videos whether it holds up. Perhaps succeeding's way too easy, and I just want to make it a 5 or a 6 is one success. Perhaps failing is too easy, and I want to take away the critical ones. Take that away. Perhaps successes aren't common enough, and I want to make it a 4, 5, or a 6 with a 6 counting double. These are all options that we can do with this dice mechanic. But at the moment, 5 or a 6 count as success, 6 counts as 2 successes, 1 takes away from your successes, is the system that I'm going forward with. Now, as we go forward as well, I'm going to start documenting these rules. I'll write them down and I'll put them in a shared Google Doc, and I'll put it in the notes down below. So you'll be able to see as we evolve the rule system as I write them down. But this week I would like to kind of go on to skill and attribute tests, because there's various ways of handling these. And although we've decided, or I've decided, I'm going to be rolling d6s, I haven't decided yet quite how that's going to work out. Now, before we go completely on to skills and attributes, I'll point out I'm not actually going to decide what those skills and attributes are yet, because that's going to require a setting. You know, the skills and attributes you have in a fantasy game are going to be drastically different to a cyberpunk game, a science fiction game, etc., etc. But I don't think it's too long before we have to make that decision. So probably in the next video, I'm going to present a few different settings that I've got in mind, and I'll make a decision on which one I'm going to take these rules forward with in the future. So then after that, we'll be able to choose new skills, attributes, and start to actually build around that setting. So at the moment, I'm just talking about, again, the mechanics behind how you roll the dice. I've probably mentioned what I'm going to decide in previous videos, so this isn't going to be a huge surprise, but I'm just going to present some options here. So reaching across and picking up my handy 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook. Skills in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons are basically a bonus to your dice roll. So with your d20, you are getting a bonus if you're skilled of about 2 points, and then you're getting a bonus from your attribute. So if you've got like 18 strength, I think that's like a +3. So you'd be adding +3 plus the skill bonus if you've got the skill, getting like a +5, rolling your d20 and adding +5 to the result against a target number. Now I'd like to point out that that's not standard for Dungeons & Dragons all versions, because if I grab my 3rd edition Player's Handbook, skills were handled very differently in that. If I look at this character sheet, we can see she is 20th level, basically, so very high skills. But the ability modifier on her hide skill is only 4, so she gets 4 points from her hide skill. But she gets a bonus of 18 from the skill itself. And she's got various magical items which add another 18 to that, because she was a very powerful character. But she's basically got 22, so she's rolling a d20 and then adding 22. So the dice roll in that one is becoming fairly insignificant. It's dwarfed by what else you're rolling. Also, I'd like to have a look at some newer games, because I know I'm focusing on a lot of older games. I'm looking at some, and they are at least sort of 30-year-old here. But looking at Shadow of Mog, a nice indie game that I've spoken highly about in the past. Now, its rules work on your attribute gives you a dice size. So if you are very, very strong, you'll be rolling a d12 or a d20. If you are fairly weak, you'll be rolling like a d6 or a d4 type thing. And then your skill is deciding how many of those dice you're rolling, which allows some flexibility within the system. Because if you've got a firearm skill, and shooting it might be dexterity based, I'm not actually quoting skills or attributes directly out of Shadow Mog here, I'm just going after the mechanics. But you might be rolling 4d12 against a target number. But if you aren't very knowledgeable and you're trying to remember something, you might be rolling 2d6, or if your skill was 4d6 or 4d4. So the chances of getting past the target threshold are way, way less. Also a newer game, although based on quite old rules, we've got Cyberpunk Red. Now, it's a matter of just rolling a dice, a d20, and you add a bonus from your attribute, and you add a bonus from your skill. So you're just trying to get past a threshold target number by adding everything together. More relevant to the dice mechanics I've been talking is perhaps the Star Wars role-playing game. This is the old Western Games D6 version. And you're rolling a number of D6s. In this, you're rolling them all together. But the way it works with attributes and skills is your attribute gives you the base. So if you have Brawling, which is a strength skill, and a strength of 3 dice, you're rolling 3 dice instantly. Then when you've got Brawling skill on top of that, you are adding that to it. So if you've got a Brawling skill of 2 dice, a strength of 3 dice, you're rolling 5d6 against your target numbers. However, the way Star Wars expresses it is slightly odd, because they express that as the set number. So your Brawling is 5 dice. It's not 2 dice adding to a strength of 3 dice. It's just counted as 5 dice. Everything starts at the attribute level, which does mean that all your skills are completely stuck to one attribute. Now, if you've got Blaster skill and that adds to your dexterity for shooting things, when you're wanting information about a blaster, you're trying to remember a detail of how many shots the enemy has fired, then you're using your Blaster skill to know that, perhaps, but that's dexterity-based rather than intelligence-based. I don't particularly like that. Also, perhaps quite relevant to the way we're doing things, is Shadowrun. We've got the 5th edition rulebook here. Now, Shadowrun, likewise, has your dice pool, which is an amount of dice from your attribute and an amount of dice from your skill. But it's getting to be a bit more flexible, because while usually the attribute and the skill are connected, there is some flexibility in there to swap them around. But again, it does list them all as connected, so there are strength skills in here, there are dexterity skills. The system that I perhaps like best for its flexibility is the World of Darkness system. So we've got Vampire 1st edition here, or is it 2nd edition? Doesn't matter. Where you have a certain amount of dice you are getting from your attribute, and a certain amount of dice you're getting from your skill. So if I open up here, I've got my vampire, Dan Quayle the politician, and he has a strength of 2 dice. If he is brawling, he has 1 dice, so he's rolling 3 dice. But if he's trying to figure something out, he might be using his intelligence. So if he's shooting a gun, for example, so he's got 3 dice in firearms, he'll be using dexterity, he'll be rolling 5 dice. But if he's trying to remember something about a firearm, it'd be firearms plus intelligence. He'll be rolling 6 dice. And I do like that flexibility. That you can add any combination. It allows so many more rolls and allows a more player-based system where the player can describe what they're doing. You know, I'm brawling, but I'm trying to wriggle free of his grasp. Oh, well, that'll be your dexterity rather than your strength. So it really does lend itself to, as the World of Darkness system's called, the storyteller system. You're telling a story, and I do like that quite a lot. So I'm being biased in that fashion. But we've still yet to decide how these add together. Are you going to be rolling a certain amount of dice? Or are these just going to be automatic successes? I'm favoured towards rolling dice. I like the randomness. But it's entirely possible that you would want to just add the amount. So a character with a 3 intelligence rolls his however many dice to see successes, but then gets automatic successes for his attribute. That's one way of doing it. As I said, I'm not in favour of that. I'm just getting you some options here, especially if you're rolling a resolution system such as rolling 1 dice and adding. You probably just want a set amount. But for something like the Star Wars system, where you're rolling your dice and adding them together, you might want to add just a set amount there. So in the Star Wars system, as we said, brawling of 2 dice, strength of 3 dice, you might want to have them roll 2 dice. So a 6, this dice rolls really high, a 6, and a 2. In Star Wars, your wild die would be keeping rolling, so we'd have the second dice to roll a 4, so we got 24 on 1 roll. But the 3 dice strength would add to that, so we'd take it up to 27. Or we could have been rolling 5 dice. Just some options there. But as I go forward, I think I'm going to be doing just the rolling the d6s based on the attribute plus the skill in any combination that the player describes the action. Skills will have a suggested attribute. So brawling, for example, will normally connect to strength. But if the player can describe his way around it, can come up with an explanation of why they should want to use their wits plus their brawling when they're fighting, then we're going to let that work. But anyway, I think I've witted on for quite long enough. I really haven't added too much here. We're just really refining the core systems. But thank you very, very much for watching as always. Most of all, you look after yourselves, and I'll catch you later. Bye now.